Have you heard the adage that most family businesses fail after the third generation? I have to say that I don't really believe it. There was recently an article in the Harvard Business Review that indicated that the study is outdated and quite flawed. It was a very small sample size done on manufacturing companies in the 1980s. And on top of that, the HBR indicates that the results of the study were interpreted in a flawed manner. Even though there are a lot of strengths and a lot of weaknesses as well, it's something that, in my view, you have to be intentional about and understand the benefits and some of the shortcomings are if that's the route you go. Stay tuned as we talk about many of those and also learn about how to think about when and why to have family in your business. First, I'll start with the benefits. I'm a very family-oriented person. My kids are still young. I have a 7-year-old son and my daughter, just turned 6 yesterday actually. And so, man, the prospect of working with my son and or daughter in the business and getting to spend all that time with them, that would be great. Who wouldn't enjoy that? There's other concepts involved. Blood is thicker than water. You can trust these people. You can trust your family more than somebody that you just met. Also the idea of if my son or daughter are, 20, 25, 30 when they start working for me, I will have known them for 20, 25, or 30 years, and surely I have a better assessment of what they can and can't do. Then those are definitely some key benefits. One caveat I would say that in some family businesses, it works until it doesn't. We've done some videos on Succession in the past, and I'd like to point you to the first season of Succession. If you look at the first few episodes, what you see is that the son seems to be primed, at least in his mind, to ascend to the position of CEO. You can make the assumption or the inference that over the past several years, he's been working his way up and has demonstrated some success. And now it's to the point where, based off some discussions between the son and the father, which the audience is not privy to, pretty soon the son's going to get promoted to the CEO position. This is really where the relationship really goes off the rails, at least in my opinion, because whenever the son doesn't get picked for that spot or whenever the father is reluctant to announce it, man, all sorts of bad stuff starts happening. And I don't want to ruin the whole series for you, but it was that point where everything had been going along pretty well. The son seemed to be, having a good relationship with his father, seemed to be, doing well for the company and whatnot. But it hit that point and whatever was working no longer was working anymore. There's another example that's closer to home for us because this was a company that we don't own or we're even thinking about buying, but we just knew some of the players involved. It was a family-run business. The father had at least 2 sons. One son was working in the business. The right-hand man to the father is how it was understood. The other son was working out of state in some tangential industry, but not the same industry. The father died somewhat unexpectedly, and now all of a sudden, the older son wants to come back and take over the business. What's right? Maybe the older son would be more competent to take over the business, but the point here is that having family in the business, at least from the outside perspective, was working for a while. The older son wasn't upset about not being in the business. The younger son was learning the trade, so to speak, and was primed to take over. And then all of a sudden, the father dies somewhat unexpectedly, and now you have this turmoil and you have this conflict ideally would have been avoided. Even if having family in the business continues to work for you, at the very least, having children and other family members in the business adds complexity. So continuing on the theme of succession, if you look at the 3 siblings, perhaps not all 3, for their entire lives wanted this, but at certain points in the series, all 3 were vying for the top spot. Now, as a father, I don't really want to have that competition between my son and my daughter where my son's competing against my daughter to be the CEO of the business. And my son and daughter, it's 17 months apart. It's not a situation where there's like 10 years or 5 years of difference. So like you can make one CEO for 5 years, and then if my son were 5 years older, have him be the first CEO for 5 years, and then my daughter be CEO for 5 or however many years. That certainly won't work, but maybe that's okay for certain of other, personality types or whatnot. But to me, I just don't really want to be put in that position. If you look at another TV series that we've talked about on the channel, Yellowstone. Here's another example where there are 3 siblings that are involved in the business. This isn't a situation where all 3 were vying for the top spot, because I think that in Yellowstone, all 3 just wanted to make sure that the ranch survived and thrived for many future generations. So what you see in Yellowstone, though, is you see three very different approaches by the siblings. You have the attorney who has his own style. You have the daughter who has definitely her own style. And then you have the veteran that still has some trauma associated with serving in the armed forces, who has his style as well. And even though they are not coveting the title of president or CEO, you're still being put in a position where you have to prioritize the goals or the proposed strategies of one of your children. And to me right now, I'm struggling with trying to figure out a TV show that my kids can agree on. So maybe it gets easier whenever they're 30, 40, 50 years old and we're talking about strategy for a business. But it's one of those things where if you look to Yellowstone, it says no business at the dinner table. Well, that's a great rule to have, but doesn't always happen. And that's the type of situation that I would be fearful of or would want to try to avoid. Additionally, what you're seeing in this day and age is just that the gap between parent and sibling, the age gap is much larger than it used to be. That presents its own challenge. Whereas in the past, the father or the mother, whoever might be ready to retire, and the son or daughter would only be 20, 25 years younger, and they would be more likely in a position to be ready to be promoted to president or CEO. You have some people that they're not having kids until 35, 40, 45. You're in a situation where the kids aren't quite ready to be CEO or president. And what do you do in that situation? It's a situation by situation decision that you would have to make. It hits home the point that having children in the business, adds just one additional layer of complexity. I will say though, there is a critical distinction between having children in the business and having children be the future owners of the business. If the children aren't in the business, they're just more owners, then I think you eliminate some of the complexity. However, as I think about how I would like to transition my business, and just as a reminder, I have one equal partner, I don't necessarily want to see our kids be the CEO or president of those businesses. However, I would very much be in favor of our kids, jointly owning the business in the future. Let me give you a little bit of context there. My family and my partner's family, we went on a vacation to a beach area. The kids, they had so much fun together. They still talk about each other, and it would just make me so happy if my kids and my partner's kids were always that happy about seeing each other. The last thing I want to do is have them be owners or employees of the business and they're at each other's necks because they're ambitious and want to get to the top spot or this or that. Additionally, when I think about bringing kids into the business, my current viewpoint, I would like to see them have success in a similar role in a business outside of the family business. Am I really gonna hold on to that for the next 10, 20 years? I tend to be a pushover when it comes to my family, and so that might be a bad decision, but let's just say I wouldn't be too surprised if I get a little bit softer on that viewpoint. However, at some point, you are going to have to put the business first or your family first, or maybe one family member over another family member. Here's where we get to the conflict or the inconsistency that we have to reconcile, because sure, I may be putting my kids' desires at that particular moment first, but really what's in the best interest for my kid? Is it being allowed to take on a position at the family business, or would it be in my kid's best interest to hold firm to that rule and make them have a leadership role in some other company? Probably you hold firm, but here's an example where think about young kids and eating habits or sleeping habits or watching TV. Sure, it's best for them to have broccoli at every meal or every day, but do you always do that? No. Would they be healthier if you did? Absolutely. Sometimes you make decisions based off of convenience or laziness or whatever that, short term are, what you would like to see, but long term probably aren't as positive as they could be. Those are the types of issues that you're gonna have to deal with. Maybe you're fine with that, maybe you're not. I'm not, sitting here trying to tell you to have family in the business or not to have family in the business. However, the main point is I just want to at least shed some perspective on some of the strengths, some of the weaknesses, some of the things you have to watch out for when thinking about whether or not you should have family in the business. I'm a firm believer that there are 1,000 or 1,000,000 different ways to raise a child successfully. I'm also a firm believer that there are 1,000 or 1,000,000 different ways to run a business successfully. And some of those ways involve having family in the business. Some of those ways involve leaving family out of the business. Regardless though, going back to the myth about most family businesses fail after 3 generations, if you look at some of the more recent data, you'll actually see that family businesses tend to survive longer than private companies. I mean, if you look at some of the biggest family-owned businesses, these businesses really seem like they'll stand the test of time. I mean, you got Walmart, you got BMW, you got Porsche, these names that everybody is familiar with, on top of industrial giants like, Bosch and some of these others that are going to be around for a very long time. Focus on building a strong business. I mean, if you focus on building a strong business, having family in the business or not having family in the business, it's probably not going to be the determining factor in whether your business succeeds. The main thing for me, whenever we're working with our businesses and whatnot, is be intentional about your decisions. In other words, make the decision, for a reason. If you want to have family in a business, make sure you're doing it the right way so that you're developing your kids so that they're going to be successful when they get into those roles. If you don't want to have family in the business, then you need to set up expectations with your kids so that they know that they can be involved on an ownership level eventually one day, most likely, but they're not going to be in the business, and they need to find ways to contribute to the family, to society in other ways. It's not always what the decision is, it's how the decision is made, how it's communicated, and how it's ultimately carried out. If you've liked this topic, please let me know, like and subscribe, and feel free to email me or let me know in the comments what other videos you'd like to see. Thanks for watching.